Okay. All right. It also does a transcript, which is fascinating and a little scary. All right. Hi. Shannon mentioned me in the beginning. My name's Annie Borton. I'm the Resource Counsel. I know some of you quite well, as I used to practice in Multnomah County and Washington County. Kevin is really going to be, Hubie is really going to be the main point on these, but I'll be assisting as I can. But I thought first we'll start with introductions, and I'll call folks out since I know everyone's in different order. Based on my screen, Dawn, you are up. Oh, good. Tara's able to make it in here. We're just starting with introductions, and I just passed it to Dawn to start with introductions.
I'm Dawn Andrews. I am based in Multnomah County and have been my entire career. Occasionally, I take conflict work in other counties in the state, and I do parent-child advocacy, which means I do delinquency work, all the way through waivers, murders for kids that get accused. But I also do dependency and TPR cases, and I supervise the team in Multnomah County for Metropolitan Public Defenders.
And I will now throw it to Victoria.
Can you guys hear me? I'm Victoria Moffett. I'm with the 22nd Circuit Defenders. We cover Crook, Jefferson County in Central Oregon. I've been here since 2016. Prior to that, I was with Union-Wallowa County defenders doing cases, Union-Wallowa County conflict cases in Baker and Umatilla. So even though I'm originally from Portland, all my practice has been in rural Oregon, Eastern and Central Oregon. As a consortium attorney, my practice is all criminal, juvenile, mental commitments, all trial level work.
Awesome, thanks. And Jennifer? Oh, Stoller, yeah.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Stoller from Youth Rights and Justice in Multnomah County. I'm the opposite of Victoria. I grew up in rural Oregon and then have practiced in Multnomah. So I've been at YRJ for 11 years. Previously, I worked at Legal Aid here and in Ohio.
Thank you. And Tara?
Hi, I'm Tara Sanks. I pretty much have mirrored Dawn Andrews. I have primarily worked in Marion County, however, and since about 1997. I started at the district attorney side as law clerk. In 2000, I moved to defense. I do all levels of delinquent cases, including waiver cases, and then all through dependency, shelter through termination of parental rights. I do have also knowledge base in some clients for some domestic relations law, not as it deals with property. I don't give up about that, but custody of the children and best interest. So that's pretty much me.
Thank you. And Jennifer Kinsey?
Hi, all. I practice dependency in Washington County primarily. I've also done some cases in Curry and in Clackamas. That's been the last 3 years. Before that, I have practiced on both sides of criminal offense, primarily in misdemeanors. Thanks.
Thanks. And the other folks that will be joining us at future dates, Rebecca Schalliger, who practices as a consortium attorney in Clackamas County, Holly Pressler, who's in Jackson County, and Melissa Rydell, who's in Polk and Lynn. Well, I always get her counties confused, but she's kind of in that little area right around there. And I think that's it. I won't have Shannon introduce herself unless she has something else to say, since she talked a lot already.
I was just going to say, I think I know everybody except for maybe Victoria and Jennifer Kinsey. I probably won't get to actually participate in many of these actual meetings, which makes me sad, because this is the work that drew me to public defense. So this is the stuff that I really love. But I really appreciate that all of you are here and part of this group and participating in this really important work. So thanks.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is a really fascinating kind of the process, right? To think about what it means to be a juvenile attorney and provide dependency attorney and TPR attorney and what that really means and what it should mean and how do we kind of think about what it means to qualify an attorney to practice in juvenile law. I will say this group we're going to do scheduling through a doodle poll because we have so many people not here today. So expect that in your mailboxes soon. We are willing to kind of look outside of business hours ourselves, but we'll keep it open to the group to kind of figure out where we can meet in a way to get these things done efficiently. I think, you know, today some of the ideas we tossed about internally about how these could be useful is really kind of planting the seed of what to think about for our next groups and what the plan will be. And so I think for dependency, I mean, you've all been practicing a long time. You've seen a lot of different attorneys come through of varying skill level and expertise, and I'm sure have thought quite a bit about, wow, if, you know, it would be helpful if this attorney understood this piece, or how do we, what is it that an attorney needs to know to do this work? And so that's really what kind of to think about here is, what are the minimum qualifications to practice dependency law? What kind of separation out within dependency should there be, if any? What about, you know, thinking about things like ICWA or termination of parental rights? That's currently a separate qualification standard. But dependency is really weird because, you know, dependency cases will end up in TPR if they don't resolve otherwise. And so having somebody who is qualified for dependency and not able to see a case through is also something to kind of consider. I hope you've all reviewed, I know you've all reviewed at some point our current qualification standards. And I think the other thing to think about are there any gaping holes that we're missing? You know, things around like guardian ad litem's, for example, or things of that nature. So to kind of think about what the whole practice and what should be a standard and a qualification and where that should be. As I mentioned, kind of with the TPR and dependency, you know, I think if there are other creative ways to think about this, we would love to hear ideas about how we help folks be able to do this work. It takes a long time to become really good at this work. And so how do we bring people in and make sure this is manageable? I will say this is definitely the floor, right? This is the starting place. There are currently 4 resource counsel who are in charge of evaluating all qualifications. And so this is something that needs to be a process that is also manageable to begin with, and that we kind of think through, you know, as Shannon mentioned, in the iterative process. And so where we start is definitely not where we want to finish, but being mindful of having this be the kind of first step in building up the qualifications and having appropriate attorneys handling these cases. And I think those are all the things that I kind of wanted to tick off, but I would like to open it up to see what you all think based on that. Anything you'd like to add, any questions, things of that nature. Or any areas in particular that you already kind of come to mind that you think like, oh boy, this is something we really need to think about or change. Yeah, Dawn.
I was just digesting a lot of what Shannon said at the introduction and agenda in the statutes that gave the mandates. And so I just want to make sure I've got a clear vision long-term. And so my first question is, will we be able to access those slides so I can go back and reabsorb it later? But 2, I want to say what I think I heard about ways of thinking about it. And then Shannon or Annie, if you could say, yeah, that's what we were talking about, just to make sure I've got it. Okay. So I think what we're talking about is updating the standards that we currently have that we use for the certifications that we send in. We've got this like skeleton that exists. We want to create a floor that will apply across the nonprofits in the future and the panel attorneys, because we are if I'm right, there's a mandate to adjust the system of public defense across the state, but it's got a rollout of a few years. Sorry.
It looks like we lost Dawn there. So hopefully she'll jump on here in a minute. I don't.
Do we know if she left because I'm on hold in the other meeting. I don't know what happens for external folks. If she joins the meeting, will she get bumped back in here, or do we need to go find her out in the ether?
If you could check in the other room, that would be helpful.
All right, I'm gonna leave here and go look over there, and I'll be right back.
I have a feeling that was a phone call in. The one thing that is hard with these is you have like a meeting going on, and if you have a computer phone, and then not knowing. Anyway, I struggle with that a lot. Anything? So while we're waiting, anything else? Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
No, I was just going to say you lost me at computer phone. It's like, computer phone?
Yeah.
I know you can call through Teams.
Yes, and we have an external call system as well that I always struggle with that automatically forwards things to my cell phone. So there are 3 separate ways for me to make phone calls, and it is never clear to me which phone number they actually call from, which is fun. I guess the other, go ahead.
I was just thinking, one of the things I've been thinking about is how hard sometimes it can be to get qualified, because they're like, in my office, to get a newer attorney TPR qualified, there just aren't that many of them, and then they have to be available to second chair it, and I want good representation, but some of it's like, how do we hello sort of what's practical, and how we do all that. It's one of the things I've been thinking about, because we have an attorney in the office who's been here 2 years, who's great, and hasn't had a trial yet in anything.
I think we'll get back to Don's question in just a moment, but kind of speaking to what Jennifer said regarding the current standards and how hard it is to meet some of them, like TPR. We have the same thing on the criminal side. There's some that require participation in a trial and some don't. I think that's the exact type of thing we want to talk about and think about is what can we do if it's not a trial? Because trials are also not always the best place to learn things, right? And so there may be other trainings or other things to be able to do or talk through with somebody that are a more appropriate way to get somebody qualified. And so I think for me, when I think about what it takes to be qualified, I think about what do I want to see from a person, and then what steps does a person take to get there. And I think we can be idealistic and they might get reined in, but kind of fleshing out that whole picture and then thinking through what we can do on a standard is what I think makes the most sense for this approach.
That's I'm probably gonna sort of echo what Annie is saying, but that's kind of, I think about it similarly to what Annie was saying, of like what do we think somebody should be able to do? What do they need to be able to do with their client in court, wherever it is, to make sure they're providing high quality client-centered representation? What are the skills that somebody needs to do those things? And then what are ways that people can demonstrate that they've met those skills? So there may be, trial may serve a purpose, but is there something else? I think about like motion practice or other like I think incorporating training, so setting sort of what is the floor for training, what kind of trainings would people need to be able to demonstrate that they can do something that they don't actually have hands-on practical experience with. I don't know if Annie talked about this whenever I was out, but one of the things is the current standards really have some serious limitations that prevent people from, moving up in qualifications. And that's sort of one of the things that we've talked about as a team internally, that the dependency standards, like this body of work in particular, it doesn't lend itself to that moving up like you see on the criminal or even the delinquency side, where you come in at misdemeanor level, you move up to minor felony. It's, so it's really, in a lot of ways, dependency and TPR work feels like an all or nothing proposition. Is there a way to address things differently? But in any event, really, I mean, the focus is ensuring that people have the skills that they need to do the work that's needed and required for good representation, and how do they show us that they're able to do those things. And again, multiple pathways to being able to do that. I think those are at least the things that we've talked about a lot internally.
Yeah. And Don, get back to kind of your question of a handle on the framework and what we're doing here.
I want to make sure I'm understanding the goals of the work group. And so if the quick response is yes or no, look into it more, we'll talk to you later. Great. But then I think if that is the framework, to build on what I understand, Jennifer's talking about, thinking of ways to get, that's exactly the problem that I see in this type of work. Because you have the relationship with the client, perhaps at shelter hearings beginning, but then the TPR, do you hand it off? How do we get that experience? Because these are private hearings, we can't go and say, I heard there was this trial and I'm going to go get the FTR and listen to it. And I'm going to pull every pleading and court order and learn from other people's work. Well, you can't do that, which is a lot of what I did as I was growing in criminal work. I've got this kind of trial and I heard it happened. And so my think outside the box idea, which I'll continue to flesh out, is some kind of a tandem, some kind of looking at tandem systems. Like right in my office now, a lot of what I do is I'm second chairing, but I think they have the cross-examination skills. They know how to find case law and they understand the structure and that, but they've just never done the trial themselves. And I'm like, and now I'm just free-form conversation.
But I think you are on the right track. And I think you've all pointed out why this one is particularly difficult to think of. I mean, because of the client relationships, the confusing rules of juvenile law and how they change depending on your hearing types at times, the personal relationships and things of that nature. Oh yeah, go ahead, Tara.
I say, in addition to everything Dawn is sharing, I mean, we see the same. We have the benefit of only having a consortia in Marion County, and we vary between 16 and 18 attorneys. And so we get the training, we have the trials, we have all that stuff that Dawn does not have. What our biggest challenge is the pay and the continual threat that consortiums will be no more. I mean, that might be okay in a lot of counties, but in Marion County, there are so many bullet point reasons that this is not okay. I don't need to share them now and save it if anyone is ever interested in it, because I don't want to just be on a soapbox. But we have a number of cases, and we do our best to follow best practice and give attorneys their own, or at least, the group, the same siblings with the same dad, and, we try to exercise best practice. Our courts are fantastic, but we have people that, honestly, the continual threat of losing their job. I will also say one of our hugest, I don't think that's a word, problems. And I don't remember which part of you are in the new OPDC, whatever. I've actually stopped even trying to figure out acronyms, but I think it's pretty important to know. If I ask for investigator, it takes so much time, and I only had 60 days to adjudicate. If I ask for money for a polygraph, it takes forever. What used to take about 1 week, now that this new structure has happened, it could take up to 3 weeks. That is very detrimental, especially when I got a sex case and I need a psychosexual because my DA doesn't want to really work on negotiating till they have more data. So, I mean, that is some of our struggles.
I totally hear that. And I think, that's something that we have no control over. The legislature is making decisions about consortia. And I know that I've heard that a bill might be coming to address some of those things. And I think this agency has a lot to think about in terms of the future of juvenile practice and those structures. And, those always impact our practice. And in public defense, we always have these, kind of difficulties and these other things. And so when we're thinking about how do we build this and also make it attractive for people to come in, I think we have a real opportunity to create a structure and have a conversation, and y'all can push the agency on these things and say these are what we think, and we may not be able to do those things or say no, which is also fine, but this is the opportunity to kind of start those kind of basic conversations of saying, you want a good practice, this is what it looks like. And then we have, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I appreciate that. Oh, sorry, Shannon.
I was just going to jump in and say sorry, Tara, real quick. That, I mean, I think Annie's right. I mean, and really the focus for these groups is on whatever like structure an attorney is working in, whether they're in a nonprofit public defender office, they're a solo, they have a relationship directly with the agency, they're in whatever the form is, really establishing standards that are going to apply across the board, because there's been a lot of change. There's a lot of change coming. What that change continues to look like, that may continue to change. And so that's really the focus for these groups is let's get some standards in place. We do have some standards already. Well, one other thing that I was going to say really quick, and then I will turn it back over to you, Tara, is, and this is to one of Don's questions earlier, is we do have qualification standards, but I would encourage all the work groups to not be too wedded to those standards. They do, I think, help inform the conversation. We're not operating in a vacuum and starting from scratch or whole cloth. But they have their own limitations and problems, right? So I wouldn't think of it as revising or modifying those as much as what does it really take to try to start on that path to really ensuring a high quality representation. And if that means you throw it all out, and start over, then I think that that's okay. But there's probably some stuff that is informative to think about that comes from those. With that, I will stop and turn it back over to you, Tara.
No, I'm gonna end real quick, but so that I omit everything I said the first half, but the second half still is true. We need to be able to feel that we could adequately represent, and getting fast turnarounds with receiving money. I think it needs to be part of our focus. I really do. And then another thing we can look at in longer dates is representation of children. That's defined by the ABA and it's defined by the Oregon State Bar. And they have some conflict. So I hear that quite a bit. So we can just put a pin in that, but I think that is something that we should look at.
Thanks. Yeah. Don?
My question is, are there some other states that you think practices or standards look good, or have been models that you've reviewed that we should review as a work group?
So this is where me being on the back burner of this one a little bit, I don't have any on that I have looked at. I'll check in with Kevin and send anything out that we have in our next with any emails.
I think Kevin has, and I meant to talk about this a little bit in the the first part. But we're working on setting up a place to share documents. I think we're going to do Dropbox. We'll share, send links to folks in each of the groups with the links to the documents or the place where they can find the documents. I think Kevin has done quite a bit of gathering together standards and resources from other states to help guide this group's work. So I don't know how much he has. I know KO for the delinquency has like a set of like 25 documents she wants to share with people. So I don't know if Kevin's got that many, but it's there will be, I think, a wealth of information for y'all to draw upon from other states, which doesn't mean that all of those things or any of those things will necessarily work here, but I think it should help guide the sort of conversation and conversations that you all will be having. So
yeah, Victoria.
Oh, one of the things I didn't catch, I've been a consortium member for 25 years, just over. And I heard that Tara is a consortium member. Are any of you, do you do the parent-child representation? Because obviously that's not part in our community. We've never had that. I envy it, but we've never had it. So I'm just looking for a different perspective. Because I think you guys with the parent-child, your program is a little more intense than what we have in terms of mentoring and stuff. But as consortium members, we have a gentleman in our consortium now who can't take dependencies. He would love to take dependencies, and he's got the perfect personality as a calm young man with minor children. I think he would do well with some of our teenage boys, actually. I'd love to get him in there, but he has to sit second on all of us, or enough people. And there's not been enough litigating that he can do. So the opportunities to mentor him, to bring him up to snuff in terms of the qualifications, has been very challenging. Just because we're a rural community, we litigate, but we don't maybe turn it over as quickly as some of the bigger communities do.
And yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think that's something kind of why we're talking about thinking of trainings or other things. Like, there's the trial skills, juvenile trial skills, college. I always forget the name of it. JLTA. Ugh, I'm so bad at those. There are other trainings nationwide as well. And, so I think those are how those can help prep somebody and what other kind of opportunities we can make for people. There are a lot of things that would go along with that we will not have answers for immediately. But I think really using kind of including those in our conversations will be important because, I could learn a lot about cross-examination of a DHS worker from a training that I wouldn't get in watching half of the hearings that, that happen. And so thinking about how do you prep for those things and how, is it a training that maybe exists somewhere or that could be created and things of that nature are all part of this conversation.
I think that's great. We could do the ICWA trainings. We just started ICWA court in Marion County Circuit Court. We too are not the parent-child representative PCRs. I may have the acronym wrong. And Victoria, we were scheduled to be third in implementation when this was in its origin. I think our county is just too big and they can't afford it. And I think a main difference then between people that are in that program is they not only have maybe different mentorship, but they specifically have case limits, and that could be good or bad. Anyway, there's a couple of differences in that, but I think trainings, and I think a really good training for young practitioners is just because DHS is a state agency, it doesn't mean they're always right. And I don't think we really talk to and train about that.
Yeah. And I know Jennifer Stoller at least has shelters coming up here, and probably other folks have hearings around 1 or 1:30. So we'll kind of wrap up here. But I think hopefully this has given kind of a foundation of what to think about for future conversations. And we're really trying to have you guys be our kind of group think, and then we'll do a lot of the writing and kind of putting things together so that, we do value your time and really appreciate how, you're committed to helping improve juvenile practice. And we want to be really mindful of just how busy you are, especially those not in PCRP counties who have higher caseload expectations. But we we just really appreciate, the effort and the thought that you all will be putting into this. And so if anything comes up, you're always welcome to reach out to me and Kevin. And we'll get information out soon. And we'll talk about, other things that will come up, I'm sure, of like, how do we share like Shannon mentioned, how to share documents from other folks. In the meantime, anything can just come to us and we'll get it out to the group. And Shannon will figure out how to share her slides. If that's in the Dropbox or a direct email, we'll get those out to folks soon.
Well, we're working on putting together a website, like a page on our website for all of these work groups, so that as meetings are had and we have recordings of them, those can be shared and anybody can get to them. Any notes, drafts of, working drafts of standards, those sorts of things. We want to be as transparent as we can be. We need to have some focus time with a smaller groups of people to keep the work moving. But certainly other people, should have access to what's happening and sort of be aware of what's going on if they're interested in that. So we're working on that too, but we'll have documents that we'll be sharing, I think, through Dropbox.
Yeah, and I will say the other piece is that we really tried hard to get a diverse group in terms of as many things as we could, but thinking about practice type, experience type, location, and things of that nature. And so we really do value all of the different kind of experiences that people have, because we know this practice looks different in different parts of the state. And so, just throwing that out there. The videos are going to be also posted online for anyone who cares to watch them. So just keep that in mind for future meetings. And that's all I have. All right. Well, thank you all for being here, and I will see you all soon.
Thanks, y'all.